Travolting presents The Fraser's Edge. Hosted by Jeff Sweeney and Stuart Elmore. Covering extraordinary measures. Enjoy the episode. I didn't kill my enzyme.
There was an enzyme in my house. An equine enzyme. I study this. I study this enzyme. You find it. You supplement this enzyme.
Devlin McGregor wanted to sell you
Provasic. You switch the samples.
He does switch the samples.
He does
in
switch
this
the
movie.
samples a lot of times. Yeah.
Harrison.
Although he steals the samples.
Harrison. Buddy. You raved against switching the samples. And now you just go and pull this shit on us?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen,
to this episode on extraordinary measures.
We did some extraordinary measures.
Extraordinary episode.
Yeah. Very extraordinary episode. Yeah. I guess, Jeff.
Yeah.
I've actually seen this movie before.
You have?
Yes.
I have not.
A long time ago. This was a classic Elmore family movie, akin to like Ladder 49 and shit. The heartwarming family film.
Yeah.
That's all about like persevering, the unlikely underdog hero that rises to the top and is able to do the right thing for the right reason.
This movie has a big difference from Ladder 49.
Yes.
No one gets barbecued alive by a steampunk.
Fuck off! Oh, you fucking idiot. I think they're going to say...
Kentucky Fried Firefighter.
You shitter. I hate... God damn it. I'm trying to...
I love you.
No. You know what the big difference in this movie with Ladder 49 is?
What?
The good guys in Ladder 49 is like, just an esteemed fire crew, whereas the good guys in Extraordinary Measures is Big Pharma.
Yes.
And boy, are we going to talk about that.
I kind of think that's interesting, and there's a very interesting approach to this movie that this movie does not take.
Yes, and we'll get into that.
Because the idea of a movie about like the harsh realities of getting a drug made is kind of interesting fertile ground. Where it's like, yes, it's all these multinational corporations and huge amounts of money and egos and competition, but it produces life-saving drugs.
Well,
is an interesting movie.
Well,
you know what this movie doesn't do? Any of that.
Well, and what this movie also doesn't touch on is the capitalistic nature of making life-saving drugs. Yeah. That in order to make a life-saving drug, you want to make a drug that's going to be profitable.
Yes.
So if you have a disease that can be cured with one pill, the fuck you going to make that pill for when we can sell you pills you got to take 1 week every week for the rest of your life, and each pill costs $1,000.
Yeah.
That's 52 pills over a year, 52 grand for one customer of that one pill.
Yeah.
But we can do it because it's an orphan drug.
Yes.
And because the only people who are going to buy this are like the 200 out of the 300 million Americans that are afflicted with this drug. Yeah. I have so much to say about...
Stuart, can we just say, in a just society, drug development would just be like sponsored by the government. And they would just like...
In a sponsored society, we would allow FDA testing of international drugs, which was a policy promoted by the 2016 candidate Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
Which everybody thought was batshit crazy because I don't want to take the experimental drugs from Canada.
Fuck them.
We have the best scientists here. Even though, like, people all over the world are making life-saving medicine.
Yeah. It's very cool and good that we live in.
There will never be...
All right, Stuart's not going to finish this thought. I also real quickly want to say that this movie was kind of distracting to watch and look up because when we're recording this episode on May 17th, right? It's the 17th?
Yeah.
14 days out from the U.S.'s potential default.
Yes.
Which you folks will know how it got resolved by the time this episode comes out.
Yes.
But right now the Treasury is using extraordinary measures to keep the government operational.
Yes.
And so anytime I Google extraordinary measures to try and find this movie, I keep getting Janet Yellen extraordinary measures will exhaust June 1st. And I'm like, what, they deleting the movie or something?
By the U.S. Treasury.
Yeah. So it's been hard to like look up shit about this movie because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it has. And thank you. I should say, like, there is some Brendan Fraser context, and there probably is some Harrison Ford context to talk about.
I got a lot of Harrison Ford context.
But just a real quick, because I don't really think we need to say too much about Brendan Fraser, because last week we just talked about a recap episode. So you guys know that, like, this is sort of, and I think I even mentioned in this recap episode, this is sort of the third two-hander movie where Brendan Fraser is acting alongside a bigger name actor in a family drama. Is this a drama, Jeff?
Yeah.
It's like a family business political drama, but more on the family side. So, I don't know. It's weird.
So quickly, I'll talk about Brendan and Harrison, and then I want to talk about what this movie is.
Yeah.
But you catched up with us last week with Brendan. This is the beginning of what we're calling the Hollywood exile era.
Yeah.
And the reason we're starting with this movie is this is, like, it.
Yeah.
Like, this is already a movie that doesn't, like... It's an attempt at, like, a dramatic comeback for both Brendan Fraser and Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And its failure is what just fully sends Brendan out of the running.
And it's no accident that the last time Brendan Fraser did a movie akin to this hypo two-hander style is in 2002 with Michael Caine.
Yeah. Michael Caine.
And before that, 1998 with Ian McKellen.
Yes.
You can see the trajectory that our boy is taking.
You can technically count Last Time with Michael Keaton if you want to. But that movie doesn't.
That no-name movie that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and this movie also does not fully exist.
Well, I would say this movie exists more than...
Yeah, it exists much more than The Last Time.
Yeah.
But
this movie is, I think, free on Paramount, Paramount Plus.
It is, and this is also a monstrous flop.
It is a monstrous flop. But I think you maybe alluded to this, Jeff, and I think part of the reason of that is I don't know what kind of fucking movie this is.
Yeah. It's... The Rotten Tomatoes description for this describes it as a made-for-TV tearjerker.
Yes.
And that's very much the vibe you get from this movie.
Yeah.
It just feels like your standard issue, like something you'd catch on NBC. Yeah. Which is funny because this movie is made by CBS Films.
Yeah.
If the counterpoint for this movie, Stuart, have you ever seen Lorenzo's Oil?
Nope.
Okay. Lorenzo's Oil is the masterpiece version of this movie. I love Lorenzo's Oil.
92.
Lorenzo's Oil, directed by George Miller, who at this point is just coming off of 3 Mad Max movies.
Okay.
And The Witches of Eastwick, a movie about a horny Jack Nicholson playing Satan. And then he makes this, Lorenzo's Oil, which is a movie about... It's actually basically the exact same movie as this.
Is it also about Pompe? It is, like, very similar.
Yeah, it's literally...
Just to read the audience the synopsis, Lorenzo O'Donnell, a Virginia 5-year-old, develops a degenerative nerve disease so rare that nobody is working on a cure. So his parents decide to immerse themselves in research and tackle the problems. This is like...
It is the exact same movie.
But the thing is, Jeff, it came out in 92, which I think is before John Crowley and Genzyme actually found the cure.
Yes.
So this is about a different thing?
It's about a different disease. But they do find essentially the cure for it.
ALD.
Yeah, it's ALD.
Which is a real thing.
Yes, it's based on a true story. Lorenzo's Oil got a lot of criticism for how much it, is anti doctor organizations and whatnot and bureaucracy.
Okay.
And whatnot. However, the movie is a masterpiece. I love Lorenzo's Oil.
Maybe I should check it out.
You should watch Lorenzo's Oil. Yeah. Because whereas in this movie, like when Brendan Fraser's upset once in the scene where he cries, and he like walks out, closes a door, and sits on a staircase and cries, and it's just like done in a wide shot. In Lorenzo's Oil, Nick Nolte, who's doing a insane Italian accent in that movie,
yeah,
gets really upset about his son's condition. and he walks to the top of the stairs, and he's holding all these research documents, and he goes, "Ah!" And then he falls down the stairs and rolls down, and the documents are flying in the sky, and there's all this like random cross-cutting of documentation and whatnot. And then he's laying at the bottom of the stairs in the position of a Greek portrait, like a Greek artwork.
The fuck?
As the camera pulls up, and he's like, "Ah! Ah!"
Okay.
It's such like an insane version of this movie.
When did you watch this movie?
I watched it last year. I watched all of George Miller's movies.
Okay.
Do you know what he follows this? So let me run down the George Miller career real quick.
We still have to do the Harrison Ford context.
Stuart, here's George Miller's filmography.
Yeah.
Mad Max.
Yeah.
Mad Max 2.
Yeah.
Mad Max 3.
Yeah.
With the Witches of Eastwick.
Okay.
We bet horny Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Lorenzo's Oil.
Yeah.
Babe, Pig in the City.
Oh my God.
Happy Feet.
Oh
Happy Feet 2. Mad Max Fury Road. That is his career.
This man.
So I just wanted to quickly say that. But yeah, you should watch Lorenzo's Oil. To any audience members who are curious about watching this movie, don't just watch Lorenzo's Oil.
This comes after a 5-year gap in between the Witches of Eastwick.
Yeah, he starts trying to make something else and doesn't. I can't remember why. What it was that he almost made. Anyway, so Extraordinary Measures. This is a movie about a miracle cure. And it's interesting. Brendan gets top billing on this movie. It is Brendan Fraser, Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Which I think says less about Brendan than it does about where Harrison's at in his career.
Yeah.
Because to be perfectly straight, Harrison Ford is my favorite actor.
I know.
He's my favorite guy.
Yeah.
I'm letting the audience know.
He's wearing a Harrison
I'm
Ford
wearing a Harrison
Frankenstein
Ford shirt.
shirt right now.
It's a shirt of Harrison Ford as Frankenstein.
Favorite Harrison Ford movie?
American Graffiti.
Oh.
It's not a Harrison Ford movie, but he's in it.
They're gonna say The Fugitive.
No, if we're talking like my favorite movie with Harrison Ford in it is American Graffiti. My favorite Harrison Ford starring movie is The Empire Strikes Back. My favorite Harrison Ford movie, maybe The Fugitive.
Or the Mosquito Coast.
It's actually The Mosquito Coast. You're right.
A movie I haven't seen, but I've heard lots about.
You should watch The Mosquito Coast.
Not just from you, from other people.
You should go home and watch The Mosquito Coast and Lorenzo's Oil. That would be a bizarre double feature.
I'm just looking up trivia, IMDb, and Extraordinary Measures. Side note, obviously not always accurate, but first thing I just pulled up.
I know what you're about to say.
The first film since Return of the Jedi where Harrison Ford has not had his name first in the credits. Wow.
Yeah. So Harrison Ford, he gets a start in a little movie called Star Wars.
Yeah.
He's in American Graffiti and a few other movies prior to that. And then he basically has a miracle run for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Because Star Wars in 97, he's small parts in like Apocalypse Now and American Graffiti 2 and all that stuff. Finishes up Star Wars, starts Indiana Jones in 81. Blade Runner the year following, Return of the Jedi, Temple of Doom. Gets his Oscar nomination in 85 for Witness with Peter Weir. Immediately jumps into another collaboration with Peter Weir. He misses the Academy Awards ceremony that year because he's filming The Mosquito Coast, which is his best performance. But Mosquito Coast, big flop. Kind of scares him away from taking like interesting material for a little bit. Not like in a way that he's like.
Is it a good performance in a good movie or just like
It's a great performance in a great movie.
Okay.
I love The Mosquito Coast.
I'll watch it.
It is really intense for him. He's crazy in it. But even with the flop of The Mosquito Coast, he just is like, all right, well, I'll just do movies with big people in.
Yeah.
And he does Brian De Palma Frantic, Working Girl, Indiana Jones 3, Presumed Innocent, Regarding Henry. He does 2 Jack Ryan movies, Patriot Games, Clear Present Danger, The Fugitive. This is like an all-star run.
Yeah.
He is like the #1 star in Hollywood at this time. And this miracle run continues until 97.
And if I remember correctly, pretty late start too, right?
Yeah, he was in I think he's 33 when they make Star Wars.
Yeah.
So he's like decent.
So by the time, and that was 77, so by the time he's in like the early to mid 90s when he's doing all these movies, he's in his
50s. Late 40s, early 50s.
Late 40s, early 50s. Wow.
His miracle run ends with Air Force One. Air Force One is like a huge success. And then
I fucking love Air Force One.
I love Air Force One too. But it's like he basically doesn't. He has like maybe 2 flops in that time period. And then Sabrina's a big flop 2 years before Air Force One. Air Force One, big success, and then it's like 6 Days, 7 Nights, Random Hearts, What Lies Beneath, which is a good movie, but no one liked it.
That's the one where he turns out to be the killer, right?
Yeah, spoiler alert for What Lies Beneath, but not that anyone cares.
No, I actually have seen that movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what context brought me to look and see that movie, but I remember being pretty good.
I love What Lies Beneath is shot like an old Hitchcock movie, so it has all these really weird shots.
That's right,
There's a ghost in it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's still a flop. K-19 The Widowmaker, another movie that I alone like.
Okay.
Where he's doing a Russian accent.
Yeah.
And then, like, they're all flops. He's not, like, doing much.
Yeah.
Attempted comeback with Hollywood Homicide. Flop. Then it's, he takes 3 years off. And they're like, the big Harrison Ford reintroduction movie. Firewall. Comes out, no one likes it. He takes another 2 years off. We'll do Indiana Jones 4. People will like that. And it makes a lot of money. But a lot of people don't like it. I like that movie. Oh, you'll notice a lot of these movies are like, I like that movie. I think he's great in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and a pretty good movie. But then, none of his attempts have really succeeded. And Indiana Jones was a kind of a laughing stock, even if it was incredibly successful. And so he kind of is just on the out and out. He's a little washed up.
Mm-hmm.
And that only lasts for about 4 years, but because it's crossing over Extraordinary Measures, Morning Glory, which is kind of a success. But then he's just doing shit like Cowboys and Aliens.
Yeah, this is when he goes into his little bizarre realm. Yeah,
because when we're checking in with him in Extraordinary Measures, he's kind of in like take the paycheck and I'll do it territory. Like, I'm not finding success in my old movies. All my other movies just aren't doing well. I'll just do your fucking movie.
Yeah.
And it's the most prolific part of his career because of this. Because he was somewhat choosy prior to that.
Yeah.
Like, he'd do like a movie a year.
Well, he's pretty good in 42, right?
Yeah, 42 he almost gets an Oscar nomination for. That's kind of like the lucky pass in the middle of this.
But then it's Paranoia.
But it's like Cowboys and Aliens, Paranoia. He was
Anchorman's
always very
Game.
hesitant to do like sci-fi movies and like movies that kind of make fun of his like persona.
Yeah.
Because he knew it hurt him. But then right around this time he does Cowboys and Aliens, Ender's Game, The Expendables 3.
Yeah.
And as well as a scene in Anchorman 2, which he's good in. But it's like he just makes fun of like killing people in Okinawa.
Yeah. Age of Adeline?
Age of Adeline. People like that movie. I've never seen it.
I've never seen it. And then
but
it's...
then two things happened to him. Two things happened to him. He gets a lot of money to come back to Star Wars.
A lot of money.
And he fucking crashes his plane into a golf course, almost dies, has his head sliced in half.
Fuck.
And you know what happens? A man gets a fucking new lease on life. Watch an interview with Harrison Ford from 2014 and then one from 2016. And watch how different the tone is. It's insane.
Like, how so? Describe it.
In 2014, she's like, yeah, I'm in this movie. I had a good time filming it. Some good guys on that crew. You watch him in 2016. He literally walks onto, I think, Jimmy Kimmel in a hot dog costume in 2016. Like a full hot dog suit with like a fake dog nose on. He's like, yeah, I'm making the movie. It's crazy. Like,
wow.
I know he was really praiseworthy of J.J. Abrams, that he really enjoyed working with him, which a lot of actors say he's like the best with working with actors.
Yeah.
And like he kind of felt reinvigorated by Star Wars, oddly enough. And then he like almost dies and realizes he must just like, he's like, all right, I should have died there. This is all like extra time. I'm just going to fucking do it.
Yeah.
Because then the run is like he's great in Blade Runner 2049.
He's fucking phenomenal in
He
Blade
does
Runner.
a line in Secret Life of Pets 2, which I've never seen. He has one scene in Rise of Skywalker, which he's good in.
Yeah.
It's maybe the best performance in that movie.
Honestly, that may be the best scene in that entire movie.
It's maybe What's
a better scene?
It's that scene and General Hux are the two things in Rise of Skywalker that escape with some
I'm the spy.
That's so funny. I think that's so good.
Yeah.
In 2020, he does The Call of the Wild, which he's actually really good at.
I've heard that's the movie where he's actually tripping on acid, and that's where the Star Wars movies comes from. It's actually just him in Call of the Wild with his dog.
Call of the Wild could have been such a paycheck movie for him, but he really like kind of puts his soul into it.
Yeah.
And then after Call of the Wild, he does 2 TV shows. He's never done that before. He does 1923 and Shrinking.
But I heard he's really good in 1923.
Yeah,
I've not heard anything about Shrinking.
I hear great things about Shrinking.
Is that with
Jason? God, what's the name? He did the Muppet movie. Jason Segel.
Jason Segel. Wow, yeah. Jason Segel. Haven't seen him in a while.
Because he was putting this show together. It's like him and the guy who did fucking Scrubs and Ted Lasso. Bill Lawrence. Do Shrinking together. But then, like, it's oddly the day this episode's coming out, Stuart.
Okay, wait a second.
Yeah.
It's a movie, a new streaming movie about a therapist in a wonky situation trying something new.
Yeah.
Have you realized the new streaming TV shows that are about therapists?
There's so many.
Like
they're all coming out of the 2020 therapy rush.
I just finished The Patient with Steve Carell and it's the same guy who plays General Hux. Donald Gleason? General Hux.
Yeah, Donald Gleason.
Yeah,
he's in one.
Yeah, I watched The Patient. There's
Shrinking.
There's another one too that I also watched. I mean, You has a lot of therapy scenes. There's another one in particular that I watched that's very therapy-esque.
Yeah.
Fuck.
There were a few episodes of the new season of Chicago PD that had a lot of therapy involved in them.
Do you watch Chicago PD, Jeff?
Maybe.
But you know what I mean? There's been a lot of therapy shows coming out.
It's all coming out of the post-2020 like therapy rush.
Well, it was the 2020 therapy.
Well, because everyone was trapped in home in 2020. Everyone got really depressed. There was so much talk about therapy in 2020. And like,
because I didn't put 2 and 2 together on that one.
And so much of this just kind of comes out of that. Like, that's so many people who've never approached therapy before.
I'm just going to say,
are now aware of it.
I was one of the few who was seeing a therapist before 2020.
You were special.
Little pat on my back.
I've always wanted to like
go see a therapist.
Yeah, I've always wanted to like see a therapist.
Have you ever gone to therapy?
No.
You should.
I always thought it'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean,
not fun.
Some people
maybe I shouldn't say it should be fun.
Think of therapy as fun,
yeah.
but no, Stuart's little therapy corner.
Yeah.
Why do people go to the gym when they're already physically fit?
To stay fit.
Yeah.
You go to the therapist.
If your excuse to not seeing a therapist is I'm not crazy.
That was really good. Give me a high five for that one.
I'm fine. Like, I'm totally fine. Well, yeah, but you want to stay like physically fit and reinforce your mental, emotional muscles. So when something does hit, you have coping skills that are not toxic. Like me drinking 2 Red Bulls and vaping. End of that.
Yeah. Quickly, the day this episode's coming out, June 29th. If you're listening then, welcome. You know what also happens June 29th? Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny comes out.
Oh my God.
So this episode's coming out ideally you're listening to this on your way to the theater to see Indiana Jones 5.
I know you are.
I know I sure am.
I know you are.
And then after that he has 2 follow-up movies, Captain America, New World Order, and Thunderbolts.
Which are the same role.
Yes, the same role as the president.
Thunderbolt Ross.
Taking over from Bill Hurt, who died.
Rest in peace.
Rip. Star of Michael.
So 2 franchises.
Yeah. I think
he's getting in the Marvel universe, man.
I think it's kind of crazy that Harrison Ford, like, when we're checking in with him right now, he's checked out, and he's like almost 70 in this movie. And you're like, all right, he's going to kind of...
How old is he now?
He's 80.
Flat?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's like still doing decent amount of his own stunts. Not like, crazy shit, but...
He's 70 in Extraordinary Measures?
He's close to 70.
I was going to say, he looks like a pretty good...
It's like 60. He looks really good for his age.
Yeah, I would say he looked like late 50s.
I think he's like 73 in The Force Awakens or something.
Which that kind of reads.
Yeah.
His age kind of reads in Force Awakens.
But he looks good for his age.
Oh, yeah, and he's great.
Yeah. It's but the thing I find funny is like when someone starts getting into like movies like this and they're almost 70, you're like, all right, the career's kind of, done. Like you had your run at it and you're just going to kind of do things like this. And he has like a comeback, but it's not in dramas. He's a comeback in fucking action movies.
Action and franchises.
75.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of crazy.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Like
honestly really cool.
Like he does 2 more Star Wars movies and Indiana Jones.
Do you think he's got another like Witness Oscar nom in the tank?
I think the second he decides to do an old man drama about like being an old adventurer and hanging up the cap or something.
If he does a Clint Eastwood Unforgiven type.
Yeah. That's his Oscar.
That's his Oscar.
And he did get to present the Oscar to Everything Everywhere All at Once last year.
He did.
The thing about Harrison Ford is that Call of the Wild gets so close to being that movie, but it's saddled with also being about a fucking dog. Because you watch it, he's giving this very tender performance in that movie of like, oh, it's my son I used to prospect, and now all I have is myself. And he's like just really depressed and sad. And the movie's about him like getting one final go at it. But it's also like keeps cutting away to this fucking dog like running, CGI dog running through the woods.
It is a really, it's not a good CGI dog, is it?
It's motion capture, so it at least moves normally, but it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem with that movie. I secretly hope Indiana Jones 5 lets him have that performance.
I mean,
because the trailer looks like it's about like getting old.
I will say, James Mangold.
But here's the thing: James Mangold wrote The Call of the Wild, and that's why I'm like, is he good? No, good thing.
Good.
That's why I'm like, if he did a rewrite on Call of the Wild.
Well,
because they screened it and no one liked it, and so he did a rewrite.
Well, Jeff, the only thing missing from his repertoire then is a movie where he takes like once a very popular franchise actor and then goes back to them when they're in a really old age, rethinking about their life decisions.
Logan. Hugh Jackman's not very old, but it is funny.
In the Marvel Universe, X-Men, Wolverine's really old. But I'm saying is...
I like the
cheat. Is this movie going to be...
I think it might be pretty good.
I think it might be really
I like the cheat of Logan, that it can be a movie about being fucking old as shit, but they are able to cast 45-year-old Hugh Jackman in it because of the cheat of Wolverine.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, Patrick Stewart shows his age in that movie.
He's old as hell.
Yeah.
Do I think Harrison Ford's going to get an Oscar nomination for Indiana Jones 5? I do not think so.
Well,
do I think that movie could be like...
Continue. Sorry.
Do I think that movie could be like he could give the performance that I've kind of been wanting from him recently? Yes.
Well, he still doesn't have a win.
He does not. He's only had 1 nomination.
Don't you think this is going to be like an Academy, it's his turn kind of thing?
It could be if it's really good.
Yeah. Which
I also think the Academy they would really be riding on him doing like, I don't know, some drama. Like, not an actual drama. It's called, like, fucking 5 Years in Winterborn or some shit like that.
I don't know.
I mean, I can be hopeful, but...
I can definitely see this being like a... I mean, this is his last Indiana Jones movie.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
He said as much.
Yeah. James Mangold said as much.
Yeah.
This is like the last Indiana Jones movie, probably.
Yeah.
Barry Paramount doesn't fuck over anything, but I mean... I have a lot of faith in James Mangold.
I have a lot of faith in this movie. As I said, you're on your way to the theater right now, listening to this episode. Send us an email. Let us know how it was.
Let us know how
Did you like it?
Yeah. Well, we'll know.
Yeah. But I think checking in with him where we are with Extraordinary Measures is interesting because we talked early in this show about how Brendan was kind of being set up for a career like his.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's interesting that we're finding them both in a ditch, essentially, at the same time with this movie.
At different points in their careers.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Fraser had a 10-year run.
Yes.
A good 10-year run. Whereas Ford had, like, a 20-year good run.
And he was older.
Fraser's now, in 2010, Fraser is...
like 30s, early 40s?
Something like that.
It's probably like 40 clean.
Yeah, they're man. Oh,
he's 42.
1968. Yeah, so he's 42. Whereas Harrison Ford is born in 1930.
68 in this movie.
42, 68. Oh, late 60s. You were right on the money. So I guess like, and something that I actually noticed in this movie, when you look at the two performances, one of them feels like they have something to lose. One of them does not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just seems like, and that being said, it's why I like Harrison's performance better than Fraser's, because Harrison is just doing like I'm an angry doctor. Yeah. Get out of my workshop.
No. And Harrison's in that same vein as Tommy Lee Jones, where even when you can tell they have like contempt for the material and they're kind of checked out, there's something inherently appealing about them being grumpy in a movie.
Which, you say contempt about the material, but in fact,
he's an executive producer in this movie.
He's an executive producer of this movie.
But it's that thing where, like, Tommy Lee Jones, when you watch him in, like, the first Captain America, you can tell he really doesn't want to be there, but it kind of makes his performance better.
Yeah, it does. Him being an executive producer.
Yes.
Now, I've not read any stories about... There was, like, one loose article, I don't know how true it is, that, like, Harrison Ford read about this story.
Yeah.
Extraordinary Measures is based off a book.
Yeah.
Not written by John Crowley, by the way. It's written by an author who wrote John Crowley's story. It's called The Cure... How a Father Gathered $100,000. And then there was another part of it. It's like bucketed the medical industry.
I got it. The Cure. How a Father Raised $100 million and Bucked the Medical Establishment in a Quest to Save His Children by Gita Anand.
That's the title.
Yes. Rolls off the tongue.
Right. I guess Harrison, there's like a small story where like Harrison read the story, did some research on John Crowley, was inspired by it, and he was kind of one of the front runners of trying to get this movie made. I don't think he was the sole proprietor of trying to get this movie made. That's not what I'm saying at all, but I do think that he recognized the story and probably wanted to try to make it a story about a father saving his kids. Yeah. Let's do it. I could play the doctor. I'll play the angry doctor. I played a doctor once. It was Richard Kimball.
Dr. Richard Kimball. So I think that's most of the table setting for this movie.
I think so. I think we got it.
I know you have a lot to say, but is that during the plot?
We'll talk about it more during the plot. Yeah. So, you just jump into it?
Yeah, we'll jump into it.
Okay.
Like I said, the first thing that snuck out to me was Brendan's top build in this movie over Harrison.
Yep.
And we just talked about why. I think we summed that up pretty well.
But the movie starts and we have a Brendan Fraser working as a senior vice president for a medical research company that also works as sort of like a grant. It's a foundation.
He works at an advertising company at the beginning.
A marketing company for, I believe, medicines.
Oh, is it medicines? Okay.
Yeah, because the movie starts with him like on the phone and be like, I gotta tell you, like kids aren't gonna take these pills if the pills aren't pink or whatever the hell it is. It's kind of an interesting story.
Yeah.
But so yeah, he's an advertising executive and he has two kids. The two kids are Megan and I think Patrick. Yeah, Megan and Patrick. He has another kid too, who I don't see his name. John Crowley Jr. But so he has three kids, two of which who are the ages about 8 and 9. Megan, played by Meredith Droger.
Yeah.
This is being intercut with him trying to get to his daughter's birthday party. She's turning 9. And it's the whole like, Dad, you're always busy with work kind of thing. Megan and Patrick have Pompe disease. Pompe disease is a real affliction that mostly begins in affecting infants.
Yeah.
It is it's like a lack of enzyme that doesn't produce a certain biological material that results in enlarged organs, particularly the heart, and muscle atrophy and neurological deficiency. So in essence, they're not able to walk. A lot of them have to have respirators to breathe, and they will over time lose even more motor functions, as we see in the movie. The life expectancy, and this is where I don't know how the movie differs, but because in the real story, his kids are age 5 and 6.
Yes.
In this movie, they're a little bit older, which I think that is because 5 and 6-year-olds can talk.
Yeah, they need them to be a little more
aware of what's happening.
Aware in this movie.
Yeah. And so, so he goes and he makes it to the birthday party. Candles get blown out. And then it's presented in the movie that the life expectancy is 9 years old, in which Megan just turned 8, I think is what it is.
So the clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking on Megan. In real life, I know the life expectancy for kids is very short, and I don't know exactly if the life expectancy is particularly like 8 or 9, but I do know where you find it, where you diagnose it is mostly in infants, which is going to be a key thing when I go on my little rant about this medication. Yeah. That is in the movie, actually.
Yes.
So, So I think it's very quickly in the movie is when he contacts Dr. Robert Stonehill.
Yeah, he's calling all these doctors to try and find the cure that no one's looking at.
Yeah.
And he calls Dr. Robert Stonehill, who's Harrison Ford, who's like, hello. And then he accidentally fucking unplugs his phone.
Yeah, it's to show that I guess this doctor is like old and not in tune.
Weird
with, like,
slapstick routine.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
but he's working with his whiteboard, but he doesn't. Yeah. They don't have a conversation.
And this is all fine, but the thing that's immediately throwing me off is that this movie kind of looks like a TV show.
Absolutely. No,
and it sounds like a TV show.
It looks, sounds, and feels like a TV show. It's like an extended TV movie.
Yeah, and I want to quickly talk about the composer of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Did you look at this?
No, I didn't look at it, but is this a commentary on the score?
Yes, it's a commentary on the score, but it's also more. The DP of this movie also shot Monkey Bone, by the way, in terms of people we talked about before. The composer of this movie is Andrea Guerra, who's an Italian composer. She does a lot of Italian movies. You know what one of her first American movies is? Hotel Rwanda, directed by Terry George.
Fascinating.
The guy we're going to talk about in a few weeks.
Yeah, interesting.
She does more Italian movies. She does this, and then she has this little run of American movies. Goes back to Italian movies, and then has recently decided to only do Bollywood movies. She's moved to India and does Bollywood movies now.
Weird
career. I just wanted to talk about that, or bring that up. But the score for this movie is not good. It's very saccharine. It's very
yeah. It was like a knock on the window. What the hell?
We're having some stain on our deck today. It's probably what's happening.
So sorry, I'm looking something up for Pompe disease.
Pompe.
Oh, most children with untreated Pompe disease die during the first year of life of a combination of ventilatory and cardiac failure before reaching motor milestones such as sitting, turning, and standing. It is rare for an infected child to live past the age of 18 months. That is from RareDiseaseAdvisor.com.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This was the most confusing bit about it for me, about Pompe disease, because a lot of the things I read is Pompe disease, you catch it when they're an infant, and if there's no treatment, which there wasn't at this point, life expectancy is very low, and the fact that they're 8 and 9 was kind of
Yeah, that's the top end.
It is very top end.
And they say in the movie that they're at the top end.
Yeah. So, which leads us to the next plot point, which is Megan in particular, she starts having breathing problems. So they take her to the hospital. This is set as your classic medical dramatic scene.
Yeah.
Where they take her into the hospital. They're talking to a doctor, and the doctor is played by some guy.
Yeah, it's no one I really recognize.
I recognize him from something, but he's not popular at this point in time, I don't believe. But I can't wait till we talked about Dr. Kent Weber, played by Jared Harris,
who does a different accent in every scene. But we'll talk about that.
So, but the doctor's essentially saying, Megan, she is towards the late end of Pompe disease. I would just, be thankful that she made it this far. And then there's a dramatic scene where she's like about to die, but then she's able to pull through.
Mm-hmm.
And so the doctor's like, listen, like your daughter pulled through, but I give her like maybe a year. Yeah. And
this is the moment that sends Fraser Crowley into like, I have 1 year to cure my daughter, to cure my children.
Yeah.
And so he leaves his job in the middle of the day and flies to Nebraska.
Yep.
To hunt down Dr. Robert Stonehill.
Yeah.
And he waits outside of his office for hours and then catches him at a bar.
Yeah.
Because he leaves and doesn't talk to Crowley.
Yeah.
And so Fraser follows him to a bar where they talk about enzymes.
Yeah, they talk about the whole, like, what's your research about finding a cure? Yeah. And so...
no one's talking about my enzyme.
Right.
He says my enzyme so much in this movie.
Yeah, he does. It's very much... So, like... Dr. Stonehill, Harrison Ford, he kind of goes on this rant about his research, about what he's trying to do, about the lack of this certain enzyme production, that he can take an enzyme from, I think at first he says like a horse or a cow enzyme from milk.
Yeah, udder.
Right.
Udder. It's an udder disaster.
Nice. And so he's talking about it, and Fraser is interrogating him about it, and he's like, well, do you think you could have a cure within a year or something? Not unless you have like $500,000 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so he says, what if I could get that to you in like a week or so with my foundation?
Yeah.
He's like, what's your foundation? I've never heard about it. We're a very new startup foundation.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, if you can get that, then that's at least a start. We can get a lab, we can get staff, blah, blah, blah. So Fraser sets off. His wife's really upset because he comes home. It's like, you can't just leave your job. We have insurance. Like, we have to have your insurance to pay the $50,000 a month medical bills for Megan and Patrick.
Yeah.
Which fills in some of the gaps a little bit about why they're still alive.
Yeah.
And it's part 0.5 of my little rant here. Mm-hmm. That it makes sense that an advertising executive who makes a lot of money is able to afford enough of constant nurse care for his kids.
Yes.
And why, if you look up Pompe before treatment, that the life expectancy is like maybe 3 years old.
Yeah. Because he's able to afford the extraordinary measures of treatment. And
like, again, I know like there's the happy family movie gloss that I wish I could just look over and be like, oh, he really cares about his kids. But I think it's worth noting that this is not a reality for many, many, many people.
Yeah.
Pompe is very rare. I think it's like 1 out of 1,600 people in the U.S. are born with this disease. There's also a late onset version of Pompe disease that doesn't hit you, I believe, until you're in your teens up to your 30.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say like that's almost worse because you begin losing motor functions you once have. And it happens very rapidly.
Yeah.
And your life expectancy, I think, is like when you reach the age of 50 or something like that.
Because the weird thing about this movie is like, at its core, you understand like the appeal of the story. Like, this movie is about a businessman cutting through red tape to try and like, cutting down bureaucracy and about the inefficiency of big pharma systems and whatnot. But then you read about like what the guy is actually like in real life, and there's a little bit more to it. But,
well, then you find out he's not cutting through any red tape. He's not cutting through any bureaucracy. He is actually going through an already established FDA plan to get this drug made, but cuts corners in through his conflict of interest, which is mentioned in this movie, to treat his kids who are older than what the treatment was initially made for.
Yeah.
Because the treatment... the cost of said treatment is by a certain amount of milligrams for infant children, because of the nature of producing these said enzymes and what attributes to the cost of the drug.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about this movie is that at the end he does like cheat the system to get his kids treated, even though they're not infants. But that's not something any other kids get.
Because, all right, now I'm going to get to my
Should we go through a little more of the plot?
Yes, let's go more through the plot. Sorry.
So basically, Fraser starts this nonprofit, and he and his wife, through a fundraiser, are able to raise $90,000.
Yeah.
They bring Harrison to their house in Portland.
They have a nice little cute scene where Harrison bonds with Megan.
Yeah. They give him the check and say, it's more than I thought, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's going to cost us a lot of money, but I'm going to give you the worst deal you ever had. You and me are going to go into business together.
Yeah.
And so
it seemed like a victorious moment.
Yeah, and so Fraser leaves his job.
Yeah.
And founds a new company called like Priozyme, I think it is.
Something like that. And this is based on the story where the people who originally founded the cure are researchers from the University of Duke, or Duke University, who founded their company. It's like Zenzyme or some shit like that. And
the thing is, all the fundraising stuff in this scene is the juice I want to see in a movie.
Yes.
Like Lorenzo's Oil, which I'm going to mention a lot, spends like probably 45 minutes about fundraising.
Yeah.
And it's all about like, greasing the wheels, and Nick Nolte's making pasta, and it's a good like that's the
just
stuff.
you fitting in the Nick Nolte making pasta.
No, because that's a major part of that movie. That is a major element of that movie.
Yeah, right.
And so like that's the stuff you want to see in a movie.
Yeah.
This movie is so quick to like get to the points that it forgets what makes movies entertaining, or like watching the process happen.
Right. And a thing that I thought this movie could have done is you see a suave, charismatic CEO, Brendan Fraser, like bargaining for money and pretending he's sort of like this objective, like maker of this miracle cure to sell it and be profitable. But behind the veil, he's a father trying to save his kids. The movie kind of almost does that.
It keeps getting really close to actually maybe
the first pitch scene. The first pitch scene.
Yes.
When he's talking to that medical board and he's the one talking about the profit share and things like that. It's almost kind of weird, and I almost kind of like it because he does speak more to that and doesn't mention about, and by the way, my kid's at Pompe Disease.
That's the stuff you want to see in this movie.
Yeah.
Like you want to see you want this movie to be about the extraordinary measures Fraser has to go through to get this drug. Mm-hmm. And instead, like, it just cuts between important moment, instead of showing us the process. I want to see, like, there's a 30-second montage of them calling fundraisers. I want to see, like, 30 minutes of fundraisers, setting up this big fundraising event.
And the pitches that they have to do to the companies, and the montage of Harrison Ford explaining the science. I want to see 30 minutes of that bullshit, too.
I want to see all the juice.
Yeah. But then it cuts to... Daddy, will I be cured? Like, and I get it. It's that family, like, it's the more milk and honey that we need to give to middle America families. But you're right, Jeff. I do kind of want to see more of like the analytical spreadsheets and when the lights turn off and he didn't pay for a generator.
If you're gonna make a movie about curing a disease, make a movie about curing a disease.
Yeah. There's also not a lot of the science in it either.
Yeah.
There's no breakthrough scene.
Yeah.
Do you realize that?
There's no breakthrough scenes.
There's no breakthrough
because he has the breakthrough at the beginning of the movie. He's like, my enzyme, I just gotta prove it.
Right. I just gotta synthesize it and like turn a theory into a reality.
Yeah.
Like, there's plenty of movies we can turn to where it's like there's Iron Man and Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
When he's like trying to do time travel and he says, turn it into this.
Yeah.
And then time travel complete. I did it.
Yeah.
That does not exist in this movie.
Yeah. Not even a baseline level like that. Yeah.
Not at all.
And I do want to say, like, right before they go into business, Harrison Ford helps Brendan Fraser put his kids to bed. And the kids, like, kiss SpongeBob. And then Harrison Ford leans down and kisses a SpongeBob plush on the forehead. And I maybe rewound and watch that twice. Because it's just like, all right. And he just kisses SpongeBob. Just knowing that happened is...
I'm glad you have that with you.
I had that moment.
Yeah.
But they go into business together. And they found Priozyme.
They set up their first pitch with these executives. And this pitch is between three scientists who are in charge of this like grant foundational business. They're trying to get some money out of them. They start with,
one of those scientists is the real John Crowley, by the way. in that scene.
That's what it was. I heard he made a real cameo in it. I didn't remember what it was, though.
I watched that scene, and I thought he looked like Paul Reiser. And I'm like, oh, is that Paul Reiser? And I looked it up, and it was actually John Crowley. I'm like, oh, never mind then.
Yeah, and so Brendan Fraser starts talking about like the profitability of this, and he mentions the term orphan drug.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Are you familiar with this terminology,
No.
orphan drug? Orphan drug is an FDA term for when, this is part 2 of my rant, is a drug where, so let's say you're a business, just purely a business. What is going to be more profitable? Coming up with the cure to the common cold or coming up with the cure to Pompe disease?
The common cold.
Right. Why? Because more people get the common cold.
Yeah.
So then, but does that mean we should just never find cures for these 1 out of 1,000 diseases? No. So what do? You label it as an orphan drug. And what that does is it qualifies you for government subsidizing.
Yeah.
Because you are finding a cure to a niche disease, kind of.
Yeah.
What that does is it gives you like special grants, special loans, special all these things. You also get an extended patent on your cure. I think it's actually extended by like the regular patent is like 10 years. I think you get a 20-year patent on the orphan drug. Yeah. And you get all these special government bonuses in an effort so you can actually make a profit on a drug of this kind. Yeah. The problem, though, is that none of this carries into effect of pricing of the drug itself.
Yes.
Which Fraser says in this pitch room, because they say, well, what are your calculations of the people taking this drug? And he says, well, you'll need probably like 2 injections a month for the rest of your life. So you do the math on that. And he says that in the scene. This is the juice that we talked about.
This is actually the scene that I would like more of,
where he kind of has to be a bit of a sniveling businessman about
because the other guy is like, well, assuming the drug doesn't work for everybody who takes it, what percentage of survival do we need to still be profitable? Yeah. And Fraser's like, you could with up to 25% mortality, this would still be profitable. Yeah. And it's just like kind of like fuck, and it's like that's the movie you want to see, is this guy who has to compromise his morality to save his kids. Yeah. Instead the movie's like, no, he's a great guy.
It doesn't even the movie doesn't even point attention to it. Yeah. You realize that? Like he says it in passing.
That's the only scene where that happens.
Right.
You expect that to be a thread, but that's the only scene where that gets brought up.
Right. There is one scene where they talk about acceptable loss. Yeah. Something like that.
Acceptable loss.
Yeah. So then they say, but we're scientists, Dr. Stonehill, can you, and he go, and there's a montage of him explaining the whole thing. And then that's when they start poking holes in his medicine, because they say like, well, where do you get these enzymes? I'm going to get them from an equine udder or whatever. Yeah. He's like, okay, but how are you going to synthesize it? I'm going to synthesize this. The FDA is never going to let you synthesize this. What's your theory on blah, 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 blah? And he's like,
he storms out.
He storms out. He gets angry that they're poking holes in his science, and Fraser has to tell him to cool his britches.
And so they get money.
They make
a deal.
Yeah. So he stormed out of that pitch, and that kind of flopped their deal, except then there's a scene where Fraser, what he does is he compromises the ownership of the company, kind of.
Essentially.
He sells the company for a certain amount of millions of dollars.
So essentially they're trying to get a grant. Yeah. And the deal he makes is that you only have to pay us a little bit of the grant now, and if we show promise, you can give us the rest later.
And he like promising of getting something in clinical trials in a year.
Yeah, and clinical trials within a year.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, like, you expect you're going to get a little bit of time of them in their lab. Within like 15 minutes, they get bought up by a bigger company. Yeah. Within 15 minutes, the investors call them like, you guys either need to come up with like $2 million or get bought up by a bigger company. Yeah. And you know what? Fraser sells them a bigger company. Harrison describes this as, you're selling my balls in a jelly jar.
He does say that.
I wrote all my favorite lines down because they are inherently funny.
What does he say? He says something that's like, I'm going to take a shit. Is that within your budget or whatever?
Yeah, he says, is that what acceptable within your budget range or something like that? Yeah. So they get bought by a bigger company, which is already developing 3 attempts at a Pompe drug.
Yes.
And so Harrison becomes the fourth.
Yeah, there's one scene where they're at their original lab where the power goes out because there's a tornado. And I do think this is kind of a funny scene because they're like, all right, we'll turn on the backup generator. And they just look at Brendan Fraser, and Brendan Fraser's like, cut to them running out in the truck. It's like, you didn't get a backup generator. We live in Tornado Alley. If I don't get a backup generator in 45 minutes, then I lose the samples and I lose 7 months of my work.
Yeah.
And then they go to a Home Depot.
And they buy a putt-putt.
Yeah, they buy a putt-putt, but none of them have money.
Yeah.
So they make the intern buy it for them.
And the thing is, can you really run a building of that size on a putt-putt generator?
No.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing.
You have to run how many refrigerators, electricity.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, could they do this?
The air conditioning, the heat.
It's not going to work.
No.
But then they get bought up by this big company, and they're now back in Portland in this big mega facility.
Yeah.
That's when we're introduced to Jared Harris.
Jared Harris.
Dr. Kent Weber.
Dr. Kent Weber, as well as Eric Loring, the CEO of this company, played by Patrick Bachow. And so it should be noted that, this is where the movie gets very much more like, oh, they're the suits, and the suits want money, and you show us progress and objectivity. We don't care about lives and kids. Mm-hmm. But it's very cartoony.
Yeah.
Like, Jared Harris is very clearly playing, like, a cartoony businessman, kind of.
Yeah.
Where he even like, Jared Harris, great villain voice.
Yeah. What accent is he doing in this scene? It changes with each scene.
I never actually caught on, but it seems like a distant Scottish.
Well, there's a scene where he comes in, he's just talking kind of like this, and I'm like, oh, is he Southern? And the next thing he comes in, oh, I'm Jared Harris, I'm from New York City. And I'm like, wait a second. He's like, I'm actually from Brooklyn. I'm like, all right, whoa. And I'm like, wait, is he actually is he just doing his British? I couldn't. It changes with each scene. He has no handle on whatever he's trying to do.
I think he regularly has a British accent, right? Yeah. And then I think he's probably just trying to do an American accent. And
he has no handle on what accent he's trying to do in this movie.
No, not at all.
And, like, it's not like they're all good. It's just he needs to pick one.
Yeah. I don't know. Shot this all out of order, maybe.
Yeah.
I think we can kind of skip, like, 30 minutes of the movie at this point.
Yeah, because nothing happens. It's a lot of, like, them just standing around. Fraser tries to steal some enzymes at some point.
Well, because what happens is there's some tension between, like, Fraser and Dr. Weber about something about getting clinical trials done, and so he does this presentation.
So the way Jared Harris sets this up is it's the 4 teams working on a cure
separately,
and he says it's an entrepreneurial capitalist model that keeps them in competition, so they want to do better. And Fraser's like, well, they're all working on the same shit. This slows everyone down. This slows the overall project down.
Right. He's saying there should be, like, a leadership team
that communicates between them.
Yeah, that they can all compare each other's work.
And the company agrees, except they can't put Harrison on it.
Because
he's crotchety. He yells and plays fucking
loud music.
Plays Creedence.
That's a lot of this movie.
Yeah.
A lot of this movie is the scientists working in their lab and then cut to Harrison working with loud rock music.
Yeah. It happens many a time.
It does. I guess in, like, real life science I mean, I'm not a medical researcher or scientist or doctor, so I have no idea what would be better or worse if you just have all these scientists working together on. Because essentially, the moment you have all these scientists check their work, it becomes one drug being made, as opposed to 4 different drugs being made and seeing which of the 4 drugs work. So it's like there is some merit behind the capitalistic entrepreneurial-ish of what Dr. Weber's saying. You also understand what Fraser's saying, where it's like if they can all see each of the piece of the puzzle that they're missing, then they'll be able to come up with one drug faster. But the problem is that one drug is faulty and doesn't work. You just set all 4 of your teams working on that one drug that they now have to go to the drawing board. Whereas opposed to if team number 2 makes their drug first and doesn't work, you still have 3 teams working individually.
And so, like, what they do in the movie is they keep 4 separate teams, but they share information.
Right. I think they do clinical trials. I think
they do clinical trials on one drug. They have to pick one for clinical trials.
Right, because
but they keep it's probably the smartest
confusing.
version of it.
Yeah,
you keep the 4 teams, but they share information that
because they conceal which enzyme it is.
Yeah.
Right, because there's like the pink enzyme, the green, the red, the blue.
No, he said he's like we have coded them after 4 main colors, and I'm like, okay, so it's gonna be red, green, blue, yellow, or something. He's like yellow, red, green, magenta, and I'm like, wait a second. Let's reel this back a little bit. Magenta?
Magenta is like classified as the main color.
Yeah, but magenta?
Like on Adobe Premiere and like any type of coloring, it's usually magenta is the option.
I know.
Yeah.
But let's be real. If you're labeling the 4 things, why the fuck you pick magenta?
I don't know, Jeff. I can't answer that for you.
I know you can't.
Maybe because red and yellow can like if they get too diluted.
Fucking purple.
Or maybe.
Just say purple. It's very weird that it's like yellow, red, green.
I have
magenta.
no explanation for it. But so yeah, they do. It's kind of like a double-blind little test where they send all 4 of these research theories to each of the teams, and the teams pick the one of the 4 that they read and see as the best.
Yeah.
And so eventually, Brendan Fraser goes to Stonehill.
Yeah.
And says, "Here's the 4 enzymes.
Tell me which one's
the best." And he says green.
Yeah.
Green's the best. He
like,
says,
"Is
be
it
honest,
yours?
Is it yours?" It's like, I know my baby from a mile away. No, that's not mine.
Yeah.
My theory's better, but this one's ready to be made now.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the key central conflict of Dr. Stonehill's arc in this movie, is that he has a lot of great theories, but he can't ever synthesize something. They say it a lot in the movie that you've never made an actual drug to market before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have the green drug ready to go to clinical trials, and then comes the main thing of, well, I want to put my children in the trial.
Yeah.
And Dr. Kim Webber's like, no.
Your kids aren't infants.
Yeah.
And so Stonehill's the one who comes up with the idea
the
that
sibling,
because they had 2 kids with it, they come up with a sibling trial, which is valuable because they're 2 people with the same genetic makeup, and see how they respond differently to the cure.
Yeah.
And so he sets that up, and then
behind
Webber's back. Behind Jared Harris's back, and Jared Harris is fucking pissed. He's furious.
And he says, have you not heard of conflict of interest? Like, we cannot put your kids in a clinical study of a drug that you are the senior vice president of, which is right.
Yeah.
That is the correct way to think about it, but they make Kent Webber seem like he's the
villain.
The villain, the asshole. So what does he do? He fires him. He says, I just spoke to the CEO. We need you to clean up your desk. You're fired. And at first he's like, oh, I got fired for pulling that stunt. It's like, no. We're firing you so we can put your kids in the trial. So, which is made to seem like it's sort of like a loophole they're doing.
Yeah.
So therefore his kids do get, they do get the clinical trial.
Yeah.
And blah, blah, blah. They're given like a IV drip. And they're like, when will we know it'll work? In a few hours or so. So then Dr. Stonehill visits, and they're talking, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, like, I really wish it could have been your enzyme that worked. And it's like, well, yeah. And it's sort of like the lesson that Stonehill has to learn that, I don't know. I don't know what lesson he learns.
And then they hear laughing.
And they hear laughing.
And they go in the room, and the kids are laughing. They're like, why? And he's like, it's the sugar.
It's the sugar
breaking down in their muscles. There's a sugar high.
Yeah. It's like, so that means it's working?
Yeah.
It's working. And it's a big victorious moment. Yeah. Hooray.
That's basically the end of the movie. We get like the classic like biopic like words on the screen letting us know what happened to all the characters, which leaves out some crucial information.
Right, because it says John Crowley now runs like a foundation for rare diseases.
Yeah. It doesn't count all the times that he almost got appointed to the U.S. Senate or ran for the U.S. Senate in New Jersey.
Right.
I do want to say there's one scene a little before the end where the family's all sitting around their TV and they're playing Wii. They're playing Wii bowling. I'm like, it's a little fucking rude of them to have a Wii. Because you gotta,
Well, because I think at what time their kids had arm function, but
no,
they lost
because
it
the Wii came out like the year this movie films.
Oh, yeah, because
it's a little rude.
The real story takes place in like the late 90s?
Yeah. Well, let's say like 2004 or whatever. Oh, no, I think it was the late 90s.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
But they have the one kid who's like fully functional, and like I'm sure buy a Wii for him. It's a little rude of them to all sit around and watch the two kids in wheelchairs have to watch their brother play Wii.
Yeah.
I think that's a little mean. Harrison Ford at one point also says, "You can't bench me. I'm a force of nature." Yeah, so the movie is, it attempts to be very uplifting at the end, but there's a little bit of that you're just like, all right. Stuart, I feel like you had more to say.
Well, so I guess like a big thing that I'm looking up an article because it's going to sound morbid, but I think both of his kids are still alive.
They are. I checked.
Yeah. So let me carry you, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, to a little more realistic nature of this drug, which I don't remember what they named. Oh, I know what it's named in real life. What it was named in real life was like Menenzyme, something like that, and then it got bought. Well,
yeah.
In 2008, I believe, either in 2008 or maybe even earlier. So this drug that they came up with that's in the movie was for infants only, because of the amount of enzyme that they would have had to produce for a larger person. So for an infant, they only have to produce a certain number of enzyme, which is cost effective, which still costs a lot of money. But then I think in 2008 or 2009, the FDA approved of the same company, Genzyme, for a drug called Lumizyme, which is for both infants and late onset Pompe disease, which is essentially just you take an intravenous powder and you break it up, and that's what you do for an injection, an infusion. I want to read this article from Reuters. Pompe drug lauded by Trump costs $300,000 a year.
It's tremendous, believe me, folks. It's cure for Pompeii. Pompeii. That's right, folks. We're pushing the volcano back in the mountain. We're saving Pompeii. It's tremendous. All those ash people. Everyone loves the ashes.
So I
thought that was pretty.
This
good.
article came from.
I thought that was a pretty good joke.
It is a really good joke.
Thank you.
I believe one of Trump's State of the Union addresses, where he talks about the need to bring down artificially high prices for prescription drugs, which is right, which is correct.
Yes.
We need to bring the prices down for big pharma prescription drugs. But while also then praising the drug that was used to save Megan Crowley's life, which is quoted in his address, not recognizing that drug used to save her life is, according to the parent company website, says $300,000 a year. Mm-hmm. But if you look up other sources, it can be much higher. On GoodRx.com, an article that came out in March 2020, the 10 most expensive drugs in the U.S. Number 8 on that list is Lumizyme, which is listed as an annual cost of $643,000. Just to read this real quick for the audience. Lumizyme used to treat Pompe disease and a hair disorder, blah, 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 blah. It affects the liver, heart, muscles, leads to weakness and trouble breathing. Lumizyme has an annual list price of $643,000, up 2% from 2019. Patients must get Lumizyme from their doctor. It's not available in pharmacies. Dosing for Lumizyme is based on a patient's weight. Patients are giving 20 milligrams of Lumizyme per kilograms of body weight through an IV infusion. For example, a person weighing about 75 kilograms, aka 165 pounds, will likely use 60 vials a month of Lumizyme, each vial with a price of $825. Mm-hmm. So, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, if you just Google what is the cost of Lumizyme, the first thing that drugs.com is going to pull up for you is a 50 milligram injection is around $1,000 for a supply of one powder for injection. And you may think, oh, that's just one powder per injection, which they do 2 injections a month. That's $2,000. That's a lot of money, but that's not crazy, right? But as I've just expressed to you, that patients need tens of these vials of powder for their body weight, hence why there were a differentiation between the infant-only based cure or treatment as opposed to the late onset treatment. So infants, you're right. They may not have to pay this much, but for anyone with late onset Pompe disease, a fully grown adult will most likely have to pay, as I just described, $643,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I know that is without insurance, and I can get into that whole bullshit because Lumazyme, the parent company, Sanofi, does the same thing that all the other big pharma companies do, which is where they get a copay card, a savings card, and all these things. So if you qualify under a certain income level, that it takes away some of the cost of that. This is where my personal things come into play.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell the audience that I have a chronic autoimmune condition called Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near as debilitating as Pompe. Crohn's disease is mostly effective in the digestive tract. I was diagnosed when I was about 20 years old, and thankfully I was still under my parents' insurance. So all the benefits all the treatment options that I had to go through was covered through my parents' insurance. It still costed us quite a bit of money. We still had to get help from other family members, which I was privileged enough to have. And I went through about an entire year's worth of very expensive treatments, ER visits, drugs, all sorts of things. And then by the end of it all, when I finally had my Crohn's under control, when I was in remission and not out of a flare-up, I still had to take a drug to quote-unquote maintain my remission, as told by my doctors, called Humira. And I'm sure you've seen commercials of Humira on TV. Humira is treated like this wonder drug that fixes autoimmune conditions such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, spondyloarthritis, and so many other things. And it seems like, well, wow, what a miracle drug. Except AbbVie has a patent. AbbVie, the parent company for Humira, has a patent on Humira, and I have to take, as well as majority of other patients who are on Humira, has to take 2 injection pills a month, biweekly. And without insurance, each pen costs $7,000. Now you may say, oh, but like you said, AbbVie, like other companies, have savings cards and they have copay cards and all these things. But when you get down to the brass tacks of when you're 26 and you're out of your parents' insurance and you don't make enough money to get private insurance, so you have to go through Medicaid. Then you have to go tell your doctor that you have a Crohn's disease patient. So you have to go see a specialist, which under a Medicaid insurance policy can take weeks, if not months, to find. So then they fill out a pre-authorization form in order to get the insurance to cover it. Then to get an AbbVie savings card, which has to contact your insurance policy, which is Medicaid. It never happens. It never fucking happens. So, yeah, I guess I had to go on this fucking rant because people can watch this movie and think, oh, how lovely and amazing. This big pharmaceutical company make this miracle drug that can help all these other people. Yeah. And yeah, it's great that we have systems in place that make it profitable to make drugs that affect limited people.
But profit shouldn't have to be part of the consideration.
But when the profit you're aiming to make is millions on billions of dollars off a product that helps 1 out of every 2,000 Americans, hence being you're charging each American, as I said, over $500,000 a year so your kids can walk, can breathe, can move, is evil.
Yes.
Is fucking evil.
Yeah. So this movie, not as nice as it seems.
All right. That was that was my thing. I had to go on that.
No, that was good that you got that out.
Yeah.
What do I do? Did I just say the box office?
Yeah, sure. Go on the box office rant, Jeff.
Movie comes out. Well, something that is interesting is I quickly talk about the real John Crowley. His clout's kind of boosted by this movie. He's a New Jerseyan. Harrison Ford calls him Jersey a lot in this movie. He is a longtime Republican potential candidate.
Yes.
He has been considered to run for Senate in 2008. Oh, God. 2011. 2013.
You good?
Yeah, keep burping. He's considered to run multiple times. He never does. He's never appointed for office. But even to this day, they still talk about it.
Wow. Like as an active candidate?
Yeah, because he's a very successful owner of the Amicus Therapeutics company.
Yeah, it's the foundation I think he made for rare diseases, right?
Yes. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And the big thing is like he joined the Navy, and that's why he was like a Navy Reserve member.
Yeah.
But it's weird because Harrison Ford is notoriously a major Democrat, like friends with Bill Clinton.
Right. And if you look at this movie on the surface,
yeah.
or the story of this as a surface level, it sounds like a very compassionate father trying to save his kids, which I'm not saying it isn't.
Yeah, I'm not saying the guy's like evil, but
right. I'm not saying he wasn't at his core trying to save his kids, but he is also making a lot of money off of his drug. Yeah. And you know what? Like, I'm also not saying people shouldn't be profitable over these things, but there's a fucking line.
Yeah, there should be. I mean, I'm not going to get into politics.
No. Yeah, you're right. We'll cool off.
Yeah.
There's people listening and be like, no, go to politics.
Yeah.
Go to politics.
Our Crash episode covered enough of that.
Yeah, exactly.
This movie comes out January 22nd of 2010. It's a January release, which usually means like Oscar potential for the year before.
Get out of town.
But they didn't do like the Oscar runs in December. This just gets kind of dumped in January. It had a $31 million budget. It makes $15 million. Less than half of its budget. It gets a 29% average on Rotten Tomatoes. It gets a good cinema score. People like this movie. It's an A- because it's a feel-good movie.
Yeah.
So, families love to see it.
It is a feel-good movie until
and so, but the thing is, even if people like it, it doesn't make much money.
No.
It's only in theaters for 4 weeks. And it's just kind of a further nail in this is like the final nail for Brendan.
You think it's the final nail? I think it's the first harbinger of what's to come.
Well, it's like if this had been a success, he could have kind of tried to rebound off of it. It still would have been the beginning of a new era for him. But just like the fact that this is like basically a TV movie put into theaters, and that it still flops, like he's toast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which really leads us into the movies we're going to be covering soon. So do you have any final thoughts on this movie? I feel like we kind of summed it all up.
Oh, you bet your ass I said everything I thought about.
I think we said everything about this movie that there is to say.
Yeah.
But after this, our next episode is going to be on furry vengeance.
God help me.
He's like really in a dire strait after this. It's furry vengeance, whole lot of soul, Escape from Planet Earth, A Case of You, Hairbrained. It's all these movies that just don't exist.
Yeah.
We're in like Travolta 2015 territory with some of these.
Right.
But we're going to be here for all of them. So make sure to keep on listening to Travolta Presents The Fraser's Edge. We're so happy to have you guys here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. As a reminder, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. As a reminder, we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Comment to our Reddit, r/Travolting, TravoltingPodcast@gmail.com, @TravoltingPod on Twitter or Instagram, @FW Sweeney on Instagram for me.
You can watch my other TED Talks on Big Pharma over at youtube.com/Stuart Elmore TED Talks.
Yeah, we'll get that set up before this episode comes out. Special thanks as always to Rebecca Johnson for the graphic design, Michael Van Bodegum Smith for the theme music. And guys, please, if you're seeing Indiana Jones' The Dial of Destiny right now, don't remember, send us an email. Let us know what you thought. Bye.